Dorian Hale had mastered the art of being invisible. In the grand halls of Harrowick Manor, where chandeliers dripped with crystals and every footstep echoed like a royal announcement, Dorian moved like a shadow, seen but unnoticed. He wasn't just a butler. He was a silent observer in a house that hid more filth beneath its gold than the outside world would ever believe. The Whitlocks were a family worshipped by the city. Wealthy, refined, untouchable. Society praised Edward Whitlock's philanthropy and admired his wife's cold elegance. Their name opened doors, silenced questions, and crushed anyone who dared to challenge them. Yet within these marble walls, servants were nothing more than tools, replaceable and voiceless. Dorian had been serving them since he was 19. Not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. His father once owned this land, before the Whitlocks' lies and forged papers stripped it away, leaving him to die a broken man. Now, years later, his son dressed in pressed tails, bowed his head, and poured drinks for the thieves who smiled as if the past didn't exist. But Dorian remembered. He remembered everything. In the hidden compartment beneath his modest attic bed, he kept a worn leather ledger. Inside, every deceitful deal, every whispered threat, every bribe that passed through Harrowick's walls was inked in careful handwriting. Not for revenge, at least, that's what he told himself, but to protect the innocent servants who the Whitlocks would gladly throw under the bus when their sins eventually caught up to them. The breaking point came on an icy Thursday morning. Clara Bennet, a housemaid and Dorian's only real friend in this house of masks, was accused of stealing Lady Whitlock's diamond necklace. It was laughable, absurd. Clara barely made enough to feed her ailing mother, but she wouldn't dare lay a hand on the family's cursed jewels. Still, Lady Whitlock's shrill accusations echoed through the estate, louder than the servants' quiet protests. Edward Whitlock declared it settled. Clara would be handed over to the police by evening. Dorian stood in the hallway as Clara was dragged into the study, her cheeks stained with helpless tears. His fists clenched at his sides, but he couldn't move. He couldn't speak. His father's words haunted him. They'll twist your honesty into a weapon against you. Be patient, son. But patience had limits. That night, while the family gathered for dinner, Dorian found himself summoned to the library. He expected another order, another task. Instead, Evangeline Whitlock was waiting. Evangeline was different. The youngest of the Whitlock brood, she had the sharpest tongue and the coldest stare, but Dorian had seen through her armor. She hated this house as much as he did. For years, she had quietly watched, much like Dorian, despising her family's cruelty but lacking the courage to stand against them. "I know Clara didn't steal that necklace," she said bluntly, closing the door behind him. "And I think you know a lot more than you let on." Dorian's heart pounded. He was careful. He had been careful. But Evangeline's eyes, so sharp and tired, pinned him in place. "You've been keeping records, haven't you?" she whispered, stepping closer. "I've seen you, always writing. Always watching. My family thinks they are untouchable. I'm tired of pretending." Dorian didn't respond immediately. Trust was a dangerous game, and alliances in Harrowick were as fragile as glass. But Clara's fate was no longer a distant threat. She was family, the only family he had left. "What do you want, Miss Whitlock?" he asked finally, his voice low. "I want to burn them to the ground," she said. "But we need to be smarter than they are." In that moment, Dorian realized the war had begun. He wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in years, the invisible butler was seen, not as a servant, but as a threat. And that was dangerous for everyone. The cold stone walls of Harrowick Manor had heard countless lies, but that night, they heard whispers of rebellion. Dorian paced his small attic room, the old ledger open on his desk, its pages trembling beneath the weight of his indecision. Partnering with Evangeline Whitlock was a gamble. She was still one of them, and Dorian had learned, bitterly, that Whitlocks only cared for Whitlocks. But her words in the library had felt honest. Tired. Like someone fighting battles nobody else could see. Clara's arrest was set for the next morning. Dorian had hours, maybe less, to act. A soft knock at his door startled him. No one ever came up here. He opened it cautiously, and there stood Evangeline, no longer in her pristine silk dress but in a simple dark coat, her golden hair tied back like a servant's. For a moment, they stood in silence, two people from different worlds, united by quiet fury. "I know where the necklace is," she said. "My brother, Tobias, planted it in Clara's quarters. He thinks this is a game." Of course, Tobias. The golden boy of the family. Untouchable, arrogant, born with a silver tongue that could spin a lie into gold. Dorian had always despised him, but tonight, the hatred ran deeper. Clara's life was a toy for Tobias, a joke to laugh about over brandy. "I want you to trust me, Dorian," Evangeline said, her voice softer now. "I know you have reasons to hate this family. You should. But I'm not them. I've spent my entire life watching my father destroy people like Clara, people like you. I can't fix the past, but maybe we can stop them from ruining more lives." Dorian studied her, weighing her words. He wanted to believe her. He wanted an ally. And the raw emotion in her eyes, it didn't feel like another Whitlock performance. He handed her the ledger. "This has everything," he said. "Every bribe, every falsified document. But it's useless unless we get that necklace out of Clara's quarters before the police arrive. They don't need proof. An accusation is enough." Evangeline nodded. "Then we'll get it back." The plan was reckless. Simple, but reckless. Evangeline would distract Tobias, while Dorian slipped into Clara's room to retrieve the necklace. But Harrowick Manor wasn't built for secrets. Every creak in the floorboards felt like a siren, every shadow a lurking threat. As midnight approached, the manor's grand clock echoed through the halls. Tobias was in the lounge, half drunk, boasting to his friends about Clara's impending downfall. Evangeline, with practiced grace, slipped beside him, engaging him in a sharp-tongued debate that flared his ego enough to keep him anchored. Dorian moved swiftly, his heart pounding like war drums. Clara's quarters were humble, tucked behind the servants' wing. It was dark, but he knew where to look. Beneath her pillow, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, was the diamond necklace. It gleamed with a cold cruelty, as if mocking him. He tucked it into his coat, but as he turned, a shadow loomed at the door. Lady Whitlock. Her icy smile didn't reach her eyes. "You disappoint me, Dorian," she purred. "I always thought you were loyal. I suppose rats will always be rats." He didn't answer. Words wouldn't save him now. But before she could call for the guards, Evangeline appeared behind her. "Mother," she said, voice like steel, "if you so much as raise your voice, I will walk into Father's study and reveal everything about Tobias's offshore accounts, including the bribes." Lady Whitlock's expression didn't falter, but a flicker of fear betrayed her. Evangeline had struck the right chord. "This is foolish, Evangeline," Lady Whitlock hissed. "You'll regret this." "I already regret being your daughter." Dorian had never admired anyone in this family, but in that moment, Evangeline Whitlock earned his respect. With no other choice, Lady Whitlock stepped aside. By dawn, the necklace had been found in Tobias's personal vault, conveniently misplaced. Clara was freed, though without apology. The family's public image remained untarnished, but within the manor's walls, a shift had begun. Evangeline met Dorian in the courtyard as the morning sun rose, casting a fragile light on Harrowick's grandeur. For the first time, the weight between them felt shared. "That ledger of yours," she said, "it's not going to be a secret forever." "I know." "Good. Let's make it public, Dorian. Brick by brick, lie by lie, we'll dismantle Harrowick." Dorian smiled, a rare, genuine smile. For years, he had been a silent witness, a quiet pawn in the Whitlocks' empire of deceit. But now, the game had changed. And this time, he wasn't playing by their rules. The storm came faster than Dorian had imagined. 2 days after the necklace incident, whispers spread through Harrowick Manor like wildfire. Servants exchanged wary glances, while the Whitlocks carried on with forced elegance, pretending nothing had shifted. But behind the grand mirrors and gold-trimmed curtains, cracks were widening. Dorian was called to the study that evening. He expected Tobias. He expected accusations. But when he entered, It was Lord Whitlock himself, an imposing man whose presence seemed carved from stone. His cold, calculating eyes pinned Dorian to the spot. "I've heard," Lord Whitlock began, "that you've taken a special interest in matters beyond your duty." Dorian stood tall, his face unreadable. "My duty is to protect this household's integrity, sir." Lord Whitlock's smile was venomous. "Don't mistake defiance for courage, boy. I built this empire from nothing. You think a maid's scandal can topple me? You're an insect beneath my shoe." It took everything in Dorian not to react. He had spent years being invisible to these people, but not tonight. Evangeline entered the study like a gust of defiance, placing the ledger on her father's desk with a soft thud. "It's over, father. You've kept this family afloat by crushing others. Dorian and we are not letting you bury another person to protect your pride." Lord Whitlock's hand clenched, but he said nothing. "I've already made copies," Evangeline continued. "If anything happens to Dorian, or to me, they'll be sent straight to the press." It was the first time Dorian saw a crack in Lord Whitlock's armor. A flicker of something, rage, perhaps, or fear, passed through his eyes. "You would ruin your own family," the man hissed. "You already did," Evangeline whispered. The silence after her words was suffocating. Later that night, in the kitchen where the walls didn't listen, Dorian and Evangeline sat side by side. Clara brought them tea, her hands trembling, not out of fear, but from hope. For once, the house felt alive with quiet rebellion. "What now?" Dorian asked, his voice weary. Evangeline exhaled slowly. "They'll try to contain the damage. They'll smear us if they can. But we keep going. We gather more proof, build a case too loud to ignore. I know a journalist who's been itching to bring the Whitlocks down." Dorian leaned back, staring at the flickering lantern. The boy who had once swept these floors never imagined sitting beside a Whitlock, plotting to dismantle their fortress of lies. Yet here he was. He thought of Clara, of the other staff who had been silenced for years. They deserved more than whispered apologies. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the main hall. Tobias, furious and drunk, had shattered an antique vase against the wall. His laughter was bitter, his words slowed. "Dorian," he bellowed, "enjoy playing hero while you can. You're still just a servant. A pawn." Dorian didn't flinch. He had been a pawn once. No longer. As the night wore on, the storm outside lashed against the manor, mirroring the tempest within. Dorian knew that exposing the Whitlocks would come at a price. They would fight back, smear him, perhaps worse. But in Evangeline, he had found an unexpected ally. In Clara, he had found a reason to fight. And in himself, he had unearthed a courage long buried beneath years of obedience. By the time dawn broke, Dorian had made his choice. The Whitlocks had controlled the narrative for too long. Now, it was his turn to tell the story. The days that followed were a blur of tension and quiet resistance. Evangeline and Dorian moved carefully, gathering every document, every hidden account, every proof of the Whitlocks' misdeeds. Clara became their quiet accomplice, slipping them ledgers and letters she had secretly collected over the years. Other staff members, once too afraid to speak, began to trust Dorian. Their quiet nods and discreet whispers fueled his resolve. But the Whitlocks were not idle. An anonymous tip reached the city papers, smearing Dorian's name as a manipulative servant who had seduced the naive heiress for fortune. The staff who supported him were threatened with dismissal. Tobias strutted around the manor, boasting that it was only a matter of time before Dorian was thrown back to the gutters where he belonged. But Dorian stood firm. He wasn't that frightened boy anymore. When the court date came, the city's elite filled the gallery. The Whitlocks, poised in their usual grandeur, expected their wealth to buy their silence once again. But Evangeline walked in with her head high, her hand firmly gripping Dorian's. Gasps echoed through the room. The courtroom didn't expect what came next. Evangeline presented every document, every embezzlement, every illegal deal, every silenced victim. She spoke without shaking. Dorian testified, his voice calm, cutting through the lies with precision. The staff stood as witnesses, brave and unyielding. Tobias tried to sneer, but the evidence crushed him. For the first time, the Whitlocks couldn't control the room. It wasn't about Dorian being a servant. It wasn't about race or class. It was about the undeniable proof that the powerful had abused their power, and no amount of gold could hide it now. The judge's ruling was a blow the Whitlocks hadn't anticipated. Heavy fines, public apologies, and, most humiliating of all, the court's approval for the manor's legal trusteeship to shift to a newly formed foundation for workers' rights, with Evangeline and Dorian as its heads. When the gavel fell, Tobias stormed out. Lord Whitlock sat frozen, the weight of his downfall etched into his face. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed forward. Dorian had been invisible for so long. But today, the world saw him. "Mr. Braith," a reporter called, "any words for the Whitlocks?" Dorian smiled, not with arrogance, but with quiet strength. "Sometimes people think kindness is weakness. They are wrong." He looked at Evangeline, at Clara standing proudly behind them, and added, "Today isn't about revenge. It's about respect. It's about people like Clara, who worked in silence, never expecting thanks. That changes now." The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was sincere. Months later, Harrowick Manor transformed. It wasn't a symbol of cold power anymore. It became a hub for community programs, workshops, and fair employment. Dorian didn't take the lavish office the foundation offered. He chose a desk by the entrance, where people could always find him. Evangeline, standing beside him, never left. He had once been told he was nothing more than a servant. But in the end, it was his integrity that built something far greater than a crumbling legacy. The manor didn't belong to the Whitlocks anymore. It belonged to every hand that had ever been told they were beneath others. Power does not rest in titles or wealth. The strongest people are those who rise above insults, stand firm with dignity, and choose respect over revenge. No matter how loud prejudice becomes, courage will always find a way to be seen. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you.